come to me. Don't keep me waiting. Please.
Videodrome. The most provocative motion picture experience of our time. From David Cronenberg, the creator of Scanners. Starring James Woods and Deborah Harry. First, it controls your mind. Then, it destroys your body. Videodrome, coming soon to a theater near you from Universal Pictures.
Ooh, weird, strange. This is George with my latest film review. This time we're rewinding back to 1983 to discuss Canadian horror cult director David Cronenberg. That is specifically his film, the sci-fi horror film Videodrome. Now, Videodrome, I actually just saw it last week when, sort of, I guess you could say a colleague of mine announced that she was going to be reviewing it. And I think I commented, I'm like, I never did get around to seeing that movie, almost 40 years. I was vaguely curious-ish about it back in the day. So I watched it on YouTube. And not that it's a masterpiece, in my opinion, but a few days later, I was inspired by it enough to see it again. It's an all right, watchable, worth a look movie, in my opinion. But it just kind of stayed with me, not so much in a nightmare way, but just it was inspiring because it kind of reminded me to think about feeling free as a writer to occasionally get a little weirder than usual sometimes, not for its own sake, but this movie it almost is like a precursor to Max Headroom and Us Magazine called it in inverted Tron. And Us Magazine and myself, we love Tron. And I remember them giving Videodrome a pat on the back, and I've heard all kinds of reviews of it, but it follows a Toronto-based cable TV station manager played by Woods, who is having trouble finding stuff, content for a station that's not the same old thing. It's a hardcore sex and violence station, and there's little touches that bring out the themes, about television kind of taking over and people saying that reality is bigger than television or along those lines and like that. So as luck would have it, a colleague of his, kind of a TV pirate, he stumbles on a show set here in America, a show that, takes him just a short while to find out where it's actually coming from. After thinking it was coming from somewhere else, called Videodrome, we see glimpses of naked women being attacked and being tortured, tied up and tortured. And the guy said, the TV pirate guy, Harlan, he says later on, a few scenes later, he goes, I watched it for an hour, and it's not just torture and murder, it's mutilation and stuff like that. So James Woods, he can't believe anybody would actually kill people and do all that, and then air it. So he, with the brief help of a female friend, investigated. So we find out what it is, and not only whether it's real or just realistic, but some other things. Some of the sort of pre-Max Headroomish elements have to do with people who've become obsessed with and desensitized by TV and people using TV and video as weapons. Interestingly enough, reportedly the reason why this movie had nothing but beta tapes and beta recorders instead of VHS was, I've heard that it's because the filmmakers thought at the time that, mistakenly of course, that VHS wasn't going to end up being as popular. And I heard a few years later, still in the 80s, that in some areas of the world, such as in the Philippines, that everything is beta, and even that was years ago, decades ago. So it's a different tone from the later Max Headroom, but same kind of thing. There's people using TV and video for nefarious purposes. It's kind of interesting too, because some of the effects headed by makeup artist Rick Baker. Of course, they're icky because this is Cronenberg, not Disney by a long shot. You can see some real cool things. You might have caught glimpses of them in the previews and pictures, and it might look a little corny, but it's an interesting part of the movie. There is some video equipment and TVs and stuff that kind of almost come to life. They start pulsating. They develop veins and like coming to life. So yeah, there are some plot twists and stuff that I don't want to spoil, but they all have to do with that. And so you have to see for yourself just what all the movie does with all that. It's controversial. Some people say it was brilliant. Some people say it was too slow. Some people say it had a brisk pace. I would say it's paced about just right. I wanted to sit here and see how it builds up. Debbie Harry James Woods was good, but Debbie Harry was in a special ace in the hole. She plays someone that she's kind of interesting, but she's kind of, let's just say, off for most of us. So, but we see what they both feel about Videodrome, her and the James Woods character Max Wren, which is interesting that his name is a common name, but it was Max because I'm thinking, yeah, and it's all, and they, Max Headroom came years later, and they both have somebody named Max in them, and similar themes. Years ago in Cinefantastique magazine, they did a cover story on the films of David Cronenberg, and it looked like not his face, but the back of his head was exploding because he made that famous. And there are pictures, some of the gory pictures, a lot of pictures are gory, and some of them said, this is what happens in the captions. And I'm like, this is what happens when Cronenberg calls out, more blood, more blood. So the next available issue, there were letters complaining about how icky it was. It's Cronenberg, so I could live with that. And those letters were under the subheading, less blood, less blood. And I understand that. A friend of mine is probably still into Fangoria magazine. I haven't asked her. But around when I first met her, I thumbed through and I'm like, it's kind of too icky for my taste, too gory. And David Cronenberg's earlier film, I had forgotten it was Cronenberg, and I'm like, it's Cronenberg-esque. And I looked it up and I'm like, oh, Shivers. That was also called They Came From Within, and I saw it. I'm sure censored, because if I saw it on a Saturday afternoon, I'm like, geez, what if I saw it when it was uncensored? Don't know. I might, but I'm not planning on it because it kind of turned me and my parents' stomach. And like that, but that's Cronenberg, and I have nothing against Cronenberg. I think I'll see more of his movies because he branched out into other things. Plus, The Fly was kind of, as my dad himself said, tragic, and so basically, this movie's okay. It's got a little bit of what I said anyway, and it has to do with false realities without really having any other similarity to The Matrix. But we all know that was about false realities, and there's that little early '80s cyberpunkish edge, and of course, by today's standards, all the completely square, boxy TV station equipment and all the electronics are all kind of quaint looking, but it's an old movie. So I'd say, maybe I'd give this maybe a 6 out of 10. Not sure about a 7, but it's kind of pretty cool. It's cool enough. It's worth checking out if you like, only if you like weird, wild stuff and a little bit of icky gore. But it isn't. I don't. It's not the goriest Cronenberg movie. But you really get some thrills out of that though once it starts to happen. It isn't all in there for its own sake, but eventually it happens. I don't know what else to say about it really. I'll maybe leave some links about this movie in the description. And all I can say is, check it out. It's not for the faint of heart, but I've seen, a lot of us have seen movies that are worse about that. I appreciate it. It's average. It's different. Uh, Us Magazine, they and I love Tron, and they gave Videodrome a pat on the back, calling it an inverted Tron, if I remember right. That's all I remember. And some of the pictures in magazines might have looked corny, and some of them are pretty icky. But it's certainly an interesting premise, and I wouldn't say they botched it either. Some people did say that. So all I can say is this is George just saying, see you at the movies. It's a wrap. Ciao.